Good morning, everyone. So, welcome to this FIWARE and i4Trust training camp, uh, based on which you will be equipped with all the skills and knowledge to not only become FIWARE expert, but also i4Trust experts. And there is um, quite comprehensive agenda of sessions along the week. And this is the first session where we will be introducing i4Trust, the i4Trust program. And together with me is Rajiv Rajani, CTO of the iShare Foundation. So let me start sharing the screen. So we shall start right away. Could someone confirm you see the slides?
Yes,
Yes.
looks good.
All right, thank you very much. So let's start with first introduction about the i4Trust program. First of all, what is the mission of this program? It is not technology driven. At the end of the day, what we aim to do is boosting development of innovative services around creation of data value change involving actors in multiple sectors. You may have heard data space as a concept is emerging with really strong um, uh, mission, a strong vision towards support of data economy concepts. And how we intend to implement this mission is through development and materialization of a vision, which is that of creating a sustainable ecosystem and a vibrant community around technology framework, and that we have set up that will enable creation of data spaces supporting effective and trusted data sharing among participants. Values that are supported in this technology framework and overall in the design of i4Trust as a program is that of openness. First of all, we are bringing technologies that are based on well-defined open standards and technologies. Concepts to be supported have to do with the trustworthy exchange of data, the ability by the different actors involved in data spaces to really perform sovereign on their data, to really support interoperability in a quite effective manner, and really bring in technology that is general purpose, therefore can work cross-domain, supporting innovation, supporting growth of companies who can really expand the current footprint they have of services with new innovative services that are based on data sharing. What we refer as a data space. This is a quite hot topic nowadays in Europe. Many of you may have started to hear about this concept, but what we do really mean by data spaces? Well, data spaces are essentially decentralized ecosystems that are built by means of a number of parties which are following a common purpose. And the purpose is not other than developing services, improving processes by means of sharing data, but sharing data in a way that you will grant that there will be effective exchange of data, and all those exchanges will take place based on a trusted identification of the participants and a secure exchange of data, so that every owner of a given data being shared can define the policies to be enforced regarding access to their data and usage of their data. Typically in a data spaces, participants will need to deploy and set up a framework that is going to be the technology framework that they will be able to use for exchanging data with other participants in the data space. But additionally, there will be a number of service providers that will bring that kind of services that are needed in any data spaces to really support innovation and connection among the participants. Examples of those services are marketplace services, brokering services, billing services, all that kind of services that the data spaces require in order to support a sustainable and innovation-driven ecosystem. And iShare and FIWARE Foundation are the partners that decided to join forces within the i4Trust program, bringing the necessary components, the so referred as building blocks, which will support creation of these kind of data spaces. There will be technology components, building blocks, being part of this framework that we are bringing together, but there will be also governance building blocks that will be needed in order to create such data spaces. iShare and FIWARE finally are working together with Funding Box, quite expert organization, managing cascade funding and also supporting the creation of communities. And Funding Box is a great complement to what we are bringing within iShare and FIWARE to really boost the development of an ecosystem around i4Trust technologies. Some examples of data spaces in real life can be around logistics, where different participants may be sharing data to determine what is the best way to handle the delivery of goods, and this way also saving CO2s, the carbon footprint, and stuff like that, or in connection to buildings, helping to support what is the best way of planning creation of development of buildings, but also the maintenance of these buildings over time to make sure that, again, we support sustainable environment activities, reduce the carbon footprint, and improve maintenance processes, to give an example, or along the full agri-food chain. For instance, if we talk about livestock farming, how the different actors in the meat production line could join forces and exchange data for the better performance of all activities, and also to make sure that, for instance, animal welfare is warranted across the whole meat production line. This is a bit the taxonomy of building blocks that are supported in i4Trust, and we are delivering within the project. There are a number of technology building blocks that we are offering that will help to materialize data spaces from a technical perspective, meaning components that the different participants have to deploy in order to start exchanging data effectively and in a trusted manner, together with a number of services that will be made available within the data space that can be invoked by the different participants. And also there will be a set of governance building blocks. These are typically in connection to agreements that the different participants have to achieve that define aspects such as legal frameworks to be supported, regulations to be compliant with, or aspects about the governance of the different version of the technology components, to give an example. We will go through this presentation trying to give a high-level overview of each of these building blocks. And during the technical training sessions that will take place the remaining of the week in the afternoon, we will go into the details about how some of these technology building blocks can be used and can be used for creating concrete experiments and use cases based on i4Trust. Regarding technology building blocks, we distinguish essentially three categories of building blocks. A first category has to do with data interoperability. We will cover more in detail what is the approach being taken regarding support of data interoperability. Second pillar will be focused on how to ensure sovereignty on data and how to make sure that participants in data spaces can be trusted. And last but not least, we will cover a number of technology components that are aimed at supporting data value creation, essentially how you would be able to offer services and data in data spaces based on i4Trust, and how providers of such data and services will be able to monetize their offering and get money out of it. From the perspective of materialization of these building blocks, as I said before, we have delivered a comprehensive set of building blocks based on the combination of building blocks that are being provided by FIWARE Foundation. And as you may know, that means all of them are implemented as open source, and the specifications being provided by iShare Foundation. In the particular case of the pillar of technology blocks connected to the support of data sovereignty concepts and trust, we adhere to specifications being delivered by the iShare Foundation, which has been implemented in open source through components of FIWARE. components for data interoperability and for data value creation comes out of FIWARE. And last but not least, some of the building blocks that will be needed in order to create data spaces and deal with governance of those data spaces will rely on iShare recommendations. What is relevant to mention is that by means of combining building blocks coming out from iShare and FIWARE, we are bringing together a set of mature technologies already proven in production, and therefore this genuine combination is really supporting creation of data spaces today. Let me elaborate a bit on some fundamental principles, going deeper into the details of some of these building blocks that will help you to understand a bit what is the kind of data spaces we will be creating based on i4Trust. From our perspective, one of the fundamental principles to cover is that of allowing open innovation to take place in data spaces. And therefore, that means that every participant that is publishing data in data spaces or publishing data services should be able to do so without knowing a priori who will be the participants that consume that data or data services. This is a fundamental decoupling principle that will be supported in i4Trust. The same way data consumers that will join data spaces should be able to discover what data and data services may exist, but without knowing a priori which are those. So this means there will be services helping to advertise offerings about data and data services, and through those services, consuming participants will be able to discover and find out and get access rights to use those services, but again, supporting this decoupling of participants. And everyone should be able to understand how data and data services will be consumed, and this cannot be implemented in any other way but really by means of defining a common language that all participants within the data spaces will use. And if we talk about language, we talk about the sentences you construct, the vocabulary you use, and what are the terms and the rules that are being used whenever any party speaks to another party. In technical terms, this means that we have to adopt a concrete, very well-defined data exchange API, because that is what at the end of the day makes or defines the kind of sentences you construct. We also defined what are the common data models that participants in the data spaces will use and reuse, because that defines at the end of the day the vocabulary that is being used, and also what are the common mechanisms for identity and access management. These three elements are very well defined in any i4Trust data space and have a very concrete mapping into very concrete technologies. What are those technologies? What is a bit the vision going further? Well, in data spaces powered by i4Trust, participants will be essentially smart applications that may already exist within given organizations, solving and improving whatever process and supporting smart decisions. And they will be exchanging essentially digital twin data. So systems within i4Trust data spaces are expected to be smart solutions, which have been designed around the concept of digital twins. And what they are essentially exchanging is precisely data about those digital twins. By means of digital twin data, we refer to the properties, relationships of entities describing real world assets. Like if I'm talking about the smart building, the different floors of that building, the rooms in that building, and with attributes such as the temperature, capacity, stuff like that. When we talk about smart cities, we talk about the streets, the buses, different elements that describe what's going on in the city. And in combination to this, we are supporting a common identity and access management framework that will be used to make sure that each participant defines a well-defined set of rules for access to their data, and this is enforced. These rules are enforced whenever a given participant get access to that data. As part of the identity and access management framework, we will support in i4Trust the concept of trust authority, also referred as trust anchor in some other environments, and this will rely on iShared satellite services. Last but not least, there will be, as mentioned before, a number of common services, and those will be the ones connected to data marketplace and publication services. With this, we will be able to create data spaces, and this is simply a very high-level view of the different participants in a data space powered by iShare. Each of the participants will deploy a number of components that they need to deploy in order to participate in the data space. Typically, this will be a context broker component, enabling exchange of digital twin data, showing, so each participant will be exposing what the kind of digital twins that represent that part of the world they are managing. There will be an identity provider and also an authorization registry connected to each of the participants. And then as common services accessible to all participants in the data space, we will have a trust anchor service that is, in our case, implemented through the iShare satellite services. We will come afterward with more details about what this means. And also as a common service, sort of a marketplace and publication platform where the different participants will be exposing and offering their data resources and data services. Very important in i4Trust, this was part of the design principles we had in mind, is that of aligning with building blocks of the Connecting Europe Facility program. And there are particularly 3 building blocks we envision will be integrated as part of the i4Trust framework. Some of them are already incorporated. One of them, very core, is the context broker that you may know will be the basis for exchanging digital twin data. EIDAS is another building block that will have to do with being able to identify the different participants in the data space. And these two building blocks are already integrated into the existing framework. The one that we are planning to integrate in the near future is the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure, which is a component based on which we will intend to support certain functionalities linked to creating immutable logs of certain transactions in the data space that will be later on supporting concepts such as auditing of processes and certain elements that might be relevant for supporting payment and billing. This is a bit how these connecting Euro facility building blocks become present in the picture in connection with the main blocks that I have already introduced. And this slide is somehow capturing a bit what are the major open standards that are supported and have been adopted in the current phase of i4Trust, because I say current phase because we plan to evolve this technology framework. And but here we have illustrated, we have captured what is being supported nowadays for the different pillars regarding data exchange API. We support the context broker technology that implements the standard NGSILD interface. We come with data models that are becoming visible through the Smart Data Models initiative regarding data sovereignty and trust, support to standards like OpenID Connect or XACML, and for data value creation, the support of DCAT or DCAT AP standards together with the open APIs. But we will go into that later on, giving more details. i4Trust is not just about delivering the technology, delivering the framework that can be used for creating data spaces. It's also about creating a community around. How we plan to set up this community will be by means of engaging digital innovation hubs all over Europe that are interested in gaining knowledge about data spaces and really bringing the opportunities that data spaces bring to the SMEs in their networks, and that want to really become protagonists of the data space movement in Europe. Of course, FIWARE iShare Foundation will be supporting this community by bringing first technical support and also training. The intent is to equip all these digital innovation hubs with the necessary skills, technical expertise that allow them to really scale up the number of companies that will master the technology as to be able to create data spaces along Europe. There will be a community platform that is set up, enabling exchange among participants in terms of experiences, also asking technical questions, getting all the support, and partnering and discussing about partnerships towards creating of business opportunities. Such community platform will be based on a platform delivered by Funding Box, who will take care of, together with FIWARE Foundation and iShare Foundation, the management of the community around. And as part of this community, and in order to kind of ramp up the adoption of i4Trust technologies, the i4Trust program will fund up to 32 bottom-up experiments, or simply referred as experiments, that will start using i4Trust. They will receive grants for that purpose, and these 32 experiments will be involving consortia of at least one digital innovation hub and at least 3 or more SMEs. And this will be our first pioneer experiments that will help to showcase how data spaces can be created using i4Trust building blocks, and will be our main catalyst towards fostering adoption of the technologies and governance building blocks. I have already mentioned about the i4Trust values. I will not elaborate on that again because I have done this already. And now let's go into more details regarding what are the i4Trust building blocks. And we will start with those associated to data interoperability. As I mentioned at the beginning, the whole idea within i4Trust is that it will be about creating data spaces where the essential coin of exchange among the different participants will be digital twin data. But what we refer as digital twin is a digital representation of an asset, which is characterized by attributes. These might be properties or relationships that establish connection with other digital twins. Those attributes may take values that change over time. Some of them are quite static, but other quite dynamic, like for instance, the speed of a given bus within a city. Some of these digital twins, because they are asset, has a location associated to them. This is not a mass requirement, but it's quite common. And essentially, what we are bringing as part of i4Trust is that the way we will be exchanging data about digital twins will be through a standard API that give access to digital twin data. This API is NGSI LD, which is currently a standard promoted by ETSI, and is the basis already for many smart solutions that are out there in the market in some domains, like smart cities being actually a de facto standard adopted among the many cities in Europe. The second element that is required when we want to support interoperability is that of defining common data models, because if we are exchanging information about the buses, to give an example, in a city, we need to understand and adopt a common set of attributes that describe a bus among the different participants. So therefore, we need common data models. And for this, we will rely on a quite interesting and fast-growing initiative which is the Smart Data Models Initiative that today has more than 600 data models being defined. And one of the purpose we pursue as part of i4Trust is that of enriching the data models that are being defined with new data models that may come out of the data spaces that are created, but of course, also allow that data spaces could reuse what are the data models that have been defined. Well, this is just elaborating on this concept of NGSILD and the notion of digital twins. This is really a cross-domain concept, general purpose. If we talk about a city, to give an example, I may have digital twins representing shops or buses or citizens, each of them having attributes, some of them quite dynamic, like for instance, the location of a given bus. Some of them might be still dynamic, but not that dynamic, like the name of the driver or the ID of the driver that is driving a given bus that may be changing perhaps twice per day. And some of them might be rather static, like the license plate of a given bus. But altogether, this means with these attributes, each of the entities, so-called digital twins, are described, and the set of values of attributes for a given digital twin, like for instance, a concrete bus, is what represent its state, a state that can evolve over time, and you are always being able to access through a well-defined API, which is NGSI LD. This applies to cities, but could apply as well for manufacturing, where of course the entities might be different, transport robots, palletizers, subfloor doors is what be the kind of digital twin entities you will manage within a given factory or warehouse environment. But conceptually, we have the same. We have entities with attributes whose values change over time. And again, the way to access those values will be through this NGSI API. Same applies with agri-food. Again, entities might be different. There are aspects that might be relevant to underline, like for instance, the fact that there might be certain entities that might be common across domains. So if we talk about weather predictions, to give an example, this might be something relevant for cities, but also agri-food. And this means some of the data models we are going to define are going to be really cross-domain. And this is something that is going to be essential in the definition of data spaces, because actually one of the things we want to incentivize is that of creating data value chains that can expand across different domains. Health could be another kind of domain where this digital twin representation applies, or energy, and so on. The NGSILD provides a simple yet powerful REST API for getting access to all this data from digital twins. We say it's simple because it offers all the kind of operations that any web developer would expect from a RESTful API. So you have the ability to refer to the attributes of entities of any given type through a path of a resource that then you, on top of which you can then perform the standard get, post, put, patch, and delete operations. But NGSILD as well will be offering a number of rather powerful operations, like for instance, supporting geoqueries, performing subscription notifications. So a given application may say, okay, send me a notification whenever the value of this attribute gets over a certain threshold, you may be able to support both pull and push style of communication. You may support different renderings when obtaining results of a given query, and you can perform also operations not only around the current value of attributes of existing entity, but also what have been the values of those attributes over time. This is what we refer to as temporal operations, and there are a number of federation mechanisms supported. We will see this with all details along the sessions that will be focused on NGSI LD programming in the training camp sessions today and tomorrow, and also I think on Wednesday. So don't worry, you will get all the details about it. This smart data models, as I mentioned, this is a link of the place on GitHub where data models compatible with NGSILD are being defined, and that will be is intending to become a common repository where data models being reusable across data spaces will be accessible. And these smart data models are not intended to reinvent the wheel. We really leverage existing standard when they exist, but we are bringing something that is quite powerful and meaningful for developers, which is, okay, how a given data model, which may have been defined by a given standard organization, how that maps into valid JSON and JSON LD structures that are compatible with the NGSI LD API. And that means that developers do not really have to come with that mapping themselves. They can go to this space on GitHub, take a look at the mapping descriptions that have been provided, and simply use them when developing. Of course, there might be some models for which there may not exist a standard, in which case the idea would be that of supporting the implementation, the definition of such models, and we have bring into place a community-driven approach based on meritocracy and best principles from open source communities, which are helping teams to contribute the definition of models they have defined already in their projects and share that, so new projects do not need to invest again in defining the models, but actually reuse what some others have been doing. The data models that are being offered through this environment are open and royalty free, and that is what we are kind of promoting for data spaces. This is a bit how the data models are being described and structured in this space on GitHub. I will recommend you to visit, and you will see data models organized around the concept of subjects. So we may have a subject which is has to do with parking or with weather, and there might be a number of models already as part of each of these subjects. So in regarding parking, we may have models for off-site parking lots or inside parking lots, and each of these subjects might be referred from one or more domains, because, for instance, the subject of weather is meaningful for many different domains like smart cities, but also smart energy or smart agri-food, and therefore might be referred from all of them. There will be a specific session during the training rather focused on smart data models that will be um, uh, given by Alberto Abella, our expert and person leading the Smart Data Models initiative. So you will have time to learn all about this later during this session. Following the slide simply tries to emphasize that this combination of the two standards, NGSILD on one hand, and Smart Data Models initiative, is something that is being supported by different organizations worldwide, ETSI, GSMA, the Inform, in the particular case of smart cities by the Connecting Europe Facility program, and also in programs even going beyond Europe, like the IUDX program in India, which is establishing a bit what are the standards for data exchange in cities. That is somehow how we are covering the data interoperability building blocks. And now the next section will elaborate on building blocks for data sovereignty and trust. And for this, I will be giving the floor to Rajiv, who will then present the next slides. Rajiv, whenever you are ready.
Yes. If you stop sharing, then I can start sharing. Thank you, Joan.
Yes, stop sharing.
Hello, good morning, and very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you, Joanjo, for the introduction so far. And let me continue on the i4Trust building blocks that Joanjo was explaining. Now I will be explaining a bit about the second pillar, that's about the sovereignty and trust, right? So sovereignty and trust, data sovereignty is what is key for unlocking the data that is available at all the organizations, because all the organizations feel that they need to have the control over the data that is their own, and they only want to share it with other participants when they know what exactly is being done with that data, because data, of course, can be sensitive and can be, of course, very well used, but it can also be very well misused. So trust and sovereignty are the key aspects in our view to enable data sharing across different organizations. So what iShare brings in this i4Trust initiative is the trust framework that we have developed using, of course, the existing open standards, and the focus of iShare is to allow identification, authentication, and authorization of identities, and in a standardized manner. So we reuse existing open standards like OpenID Connect OR 2.0 XSEML, and our framework is closely aligned to and in fact uses EIDAS framework as well. So it is pretty standard in what it does, but of course some of these standards are not designed for enterprise use. So there are some adjustments that we have done to make sure that it works well in B2B, B2G situations as well, right? So um, it is all when we started iShare, we learned from organizations in the sector that there was one key element that was holding them back in order to share data with each other. I mean, of course, they do share data with each other to some extent, which is necessary for them to do business. But there are more potential solutions and more potential opportunities that they miss out on, because there is more data that they can share, but they do not share out of lack of trust. So in order to break that, and allow them, or in order to give them control, this framework is designed, of course, on one end it has a technical specification, But on the other hand, the technical specification ties very well with the legal framework, which allows the participants to gain trust with whom they are sharing the data, and they can determine what the receiver of that data can do with that data. So of course, various forms of interactions are possible in that sense, machine to machine. So when two servers are talking and sharing data with each other, or when there is a human or employee of one organization accesses data from another organization, in both cases we need trustworthy identification, authentication, and authorization. So that is what the specification provides. There are, of course, then you need the flexibility in the authorizations for some people, and at different times you need to provide different kind of authorizations to either a company or a person. And for some where you have a regular connection with or regular business with, you may want to give broader access to them. So there has to be some flexibility in the terms of authorization you give. Identities, of course, they need to be recognized by you, but it should not mean that it is locked into one particular provider. It should be easier for every participant to switch their identities and still continue to operate and identify in the same manner in the network, so that they can continue to gain access to the data that they are authorized for, right? Of course, we have often seen that people and organizations having authorization itself does not suffice, and many times they need to delegate it further down the line, so that other parties or other subcontractors, for example, can also have access to the data directly, instead of going via the delegator for that data. That is just to make the process much more efficient, and getting more real time or more up to date information, avoiding any miscommunications and errors due to not updated data. And all this when you still are in control as a owner of that data. So you always determine what are the rules when you share the data. Okay, what the receiver of the data could do, right? And there is, of course, the legal backing behind it to make sure that the other party can comply with. So in essence, the iShare is a legal framework that we provide with the legal assurance. And as you can see in this, we have three kind of roles defined in iShare. The data consumer who receives the data provider who is providing the data, and the data owner who is owner of that data at a particular given time, who allows access to the consumer to receive the data. And for that, we reuse existing identities that are available, that data consumer and data owner and those can use. But at the same time, we also have defined something called authorization registry, where from where you can get, as a data provider, you can verify if the particular identity has access to the data that it is requesting to. And you also give out, okay, what kind of access that they have and what they can do with that data. And of course, through this whole data space, the central aspect is the iShare satellite, which guards the trust in the data space, in the sense that satellite is nothing but a role where that organization is responsible for onboarding participants of this data space, so that every other participant of the data space can identify and authenticate that particular participant, and can share data with them in a trusted manner. So satellite plays that key role in enabling that. Of course, these roles are satellite role as well is a federated role, and so are the other roles like identity providers and authorization registry. So it's not like one party playing all that roles, but there are multiple players that are possible, and the data owner, data provider, and data consumer have complete freedom of the choice of with whom they want to do their business with, or which identity provider they want to select or which authorization registry they want to select, right? And this enables, of course, not only sharing of data within the data space, but also cross-domain data sharing. This is just an example of how various parties like logistics, there is a financial industry like bank and insurance, and there's customs. When if you talk about goods being transported, it's not only goods, but there's a lot of data flow involved in that transaction of goods flow, because from the start to end there is a lot of paperwork that is being done, and there are a lot of different kinds of organizations are involved in the whole chain. And if you imagine, if you combine or if you enable cross-domain data sharing in an easier manner, how much more efficient we can efficiencies we can bring in this whole supply chain or value chain, right? And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the key is the trust element and the providing the data sovereignty to all those participants in the supply chain. Of course, this example is of logistics, but it is of course replicable in every other sector or every other industry where there are of course different kinds of parties involved, and you want to share data with them in a decentralized manner, so that it's not what is enabled is decentralized data sharing and not something like you have to copy your data to a central platform from where data is shared, right? So and all that by still maintaining the data sovereignty and trust in the network. You share your data and you remain in control, and the receiver of the data is also assured that they are getting the data from the right source, and they can trust that information because of within it is being received in a trusted environment. Why iShare? Well, this is just to explain to you what we have currently as an iShare. It's a very well known and proven framework, trust framework, which is operational already, and many organizations are taking benefit of it. It is a standard for B2B data sharing, right? And of course within the domain, but also cross domains data sharing. Initiatives like IDS also acknowledge what we do is as iShare, and parts of their reference architecture are aligned with what iShare framework has defined. And of course, our identity framework is based on the self-building block EIDAS, as already explained by Kwanko. Yeah. Furthermore reasons, currently there are already in Dutch logistics space data for more than 100,000 companies available and being shared by different participants. You can see some examples here. And what we expect, we also have upcoming data energy space, energy data space. Once it is operational, it becomes the data of around 1.5 million companies would be available within that data space for other consumers in a trusted manner, of course. So there are more data spaces that are being formed, which uses iShare as the basis framework. And of course, in i4Trust, all the experiments, we expect that i4Trust building blocks, they will use that, and they will be interoperable with all these data spaces that are being created, and immediately can benefit from sharing data on those lines. Yeah, I think Juanjo, it's your part, no?
Okay, thank you. Yes, let me just briefly now share again the slide. Give me a second. So next is about the data value creation set of technology building blocks. This essentially we will distinguish two kind of services on one side, and this is the first set of services that will be available in the current phase of i4Trust is data marketplace services. This is essentially a service through which the different participants in the data space will be able to define and advertise offerings around any kind of digital asset, but concretely in the context of data spaces would be data access services or data processing services. These kind of marketplace services are actually well integrated with the identity management and identity and access management framework that will be part of i4Trust. We will see in the session that is in the afternoon, I think it's on Friday, how the marketplace services will be integrated with the components every participant deploy for a particular reference use case scenario. And it's worth to mention that the marketplace services that are implemented in i4Trust are relying on strong set of recommendations coming from an organization called TM Forum. TM Forum is a well-reputed organization that is particularly strong in the telecom and service providers arena. And they have come with a set of recommendations about APIs to support different business support processes. And in particular, we are adopting and incorporating those set of APIs associated to the life cycle of product offerings, product definitions, and every aspect connected to product orderings and usage management and billing. And these have been the basis for the creation of the marketplace services supported in i4Trust. And through this, the different participants will be able to expose services and be able to charge for them, supporting different pricing models with support of from very basic models like of course offering for free of data and data processing services to one-time payment of monthly fees to more sophisticated pricing models based on pay-per-use, adoption of discounts and fees, and so on and so forth. So quite a number of different revenue sharing and pricing models to be supported through the marketplace services in i4Trust. And also as part of the description of what you offer, the concrete license terms and conditions that a given provider will associate to its service. Not yet available, but soon in a future release of i4Trust, we will also integrate the ability to get part of the resources, particularly data resources, available in existing publication platforms that may be compliant with standards like the DCAT-AP. And this as a means of supporting smooth migration and evolution of existing open data portals, particularly in public administrations, to data marketplaces, which are quite more advanced concepts and will be definitely supported within i4Trust. Part as complementing these data publication services, there will be also data discovery brokering services based on NGS-ILD, and as part of the evolution of the framework over time. And with this, I move now again to Rajib so that he could cover the building blocks connected to data spaces governance. So, Rajib,
Yeah.
you are ready.
Yeah.
We stop sharing. So now you can take.
Thank you. I'll share my screen in a bit. Mm, I hope you are able to see my screen. Okay, so now we already talked about the technology building blocks or the technology pillars of the building blocks for creation of data space that we bring in i4Trust. And of course the key aspect or the key elements that are there once you have something, once you have a solution, you need to also operationalize it and you need to maintain that. And a part of that is in the data space governance. So if you have a data space which you initiate, you also need to govern that data space in order to continue to make sure that it continues to operate and remains relevant even in future by making sure you keep on updating as new versions of technology or new technologies are made available, which makes life easier for everyone, right? So yeah, this building block or this pillar is about the governance. And since iShare is already a framework which has an operational governance in place, and this whole legal framework that we provide, so sorry, I'll go back a bit. So it covers a few elements, and we provide some basis for every data space to use that as a foundation to begin with. And of course each data space can further um, add their own elements to this governance aspect. Now let's see uh, some of the detail points in some of these blocks. So in terms of business agreements, as I was mentioning earlier, that you remain as a data owner, you remain in control of what happens to your data, and that in essence brings you the data sovereignty. And the way we achieve that is that, of course, when you join a data space, you sign up an agreement uh, which every other participant has also signed. And uh, this uh, this signing, this concept is called multilateral trust, because you all sign the same agreement. And in that agreement, you agree that you will abide by the terms of use, and you will abide by the licenses that are attached to the data when you receive that data, right? So this enables every member of that data space to trust each other and share data with each other. So now the other part is, of course, how does the owner inform the consumer about, okay, what rights you have over this data? And for that, we have the concept called data licenses that we have brought in. And this license itself determines what the receiver of that data can do. Just an example, on a very open range, it can be a license where, yeah, when you receive this data, you are free to use this as you will. That's on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end, there could be like, okay, you receive this data only to process so and so, and you can use this data only once, and after that you have to delete it. Or for example, you can only have this data for 1 week or something. That could be the term of the license itself. And when you authorize someone, you attach a license to that authorization, so that when consumer receives that data, it uses that, it knows, okay, under that license it has received it, and it has to make sure that it follows um, uh, it abides by that license, so that there is no misuse of the trust. Of course, if the owner determines that the receiver of the data did not fulfill its obligation, then it has also the legal means to take action against that receiver, and it can prove that this data has been shared under these conditions, because as per our specifications, when you share data, these are all digitally signed information that is shared across between participants, so that they can keep a log of those digitally signed information, which they can later use to prove that, yeah, it was given under this pretext, right? Some operational agreements which we have already defined, because in earlier slides I showed you the roles that we have defined as per within the data space. And of course, some of these roles are enabler roles, in the sense that these roles enable other participants to share data, like identity provider, like authorization registry, like satellites. So of course, if you use them, you need to be able to rely on them to, so that they are always up and running, or operational, and they make sure that they follow certain processes. So some of these, of course, the one that we require to maintain the basic level of trust are defined in iShare framework itself. So when any participant who plays one of those roles, they need to certify themselves by proving that they follow certain process, and they have taken care of the service levels of their operational systems with their availability and those aspects. So these are the basic service level agreements, and every data space has, of course, option to add their own specifications on top of that, to make sure that it becomes relevant within their data space, right? And of course, governance, because you have an operational solution, and of course you need to govern it. And as in the data space is made up of all the participants, and each participant has a say in the data space that they are part of. It has to be properly governed, in the sense that it does not become one-sided, or other participants don't feel left out in within the data space. And of course, to maintain the trust within the network, to make sure that the organizations that are providing services are operational, and they maintain certain level of assurance and operationality by providing regular audits and those things. So these elements form the governance, and they uh, the data space bodies, they have to govern themselves. And for that, we have what we FIWARE also has their own governance structure, and iShare has a governance structure, which we recommend that you can use them, or you can base your governance structure based on these governance frameworks that we have already developed. And on top of it, of course, what additional requirements are there for your own data space, you can update your governance framework in those areas. But that gives you effective governance of your data space, right? So that was about the building blocks of the data space, and that was specifically on the pillar of the governance. Now I will briefly introduce you to the roles of i4Trust data spaces. So, as explained earlier, in a data space, we always require that there is a organizations who are involved in the data exchange, the consumer and the provider, and of course there is the owner who authorizes the receiver to have data on its own behalf, right? But in order to enable that, there are also supporting roles that are necessary in this space. So this, in essence, what you see on the screen is what we think is the basis of any data space. So you need, at the top, you need a trust anchor or trust provider. It is a trusted uh, organization, like an industry association or industry body, usually not operating not for profit, and sort of neutral, which is responsible for registering all the participants who are playing different roles in this data space, right? um, it needs to be neutral so that it's not one-sided, or the data space does not become one-sided. That is the key element behind it. And then on the middle layer, you see all the data exchange parties who wants to exchange the data. So on the one hand is the consumer who wants to get the data. On the other hand is the data provider along with the data owner. So data owner has usually the data at the data provider, and it will allow access to the data to the consumer via the data provider. And of course, on the bottom of the screen, you see the three elements that are the identity provider, the marketplace, and the authorization provider. These are the enabling roles which enable the data exchanging parties to either find themselves or identify, authenticate, authorize themselves, right? We'll see in more detail about these roles in the next slides. But of course, before moving on, i4Trust complies with how iShare and FIWARE fits within this role. So as explained by Chuanjo already, that iShare specifications there are specifications given, and based on the role models, these are the logos you can see at various points. We have defined them as a role, and there are some specifications available for them. So like for the trust provider, there is this iShare satellite role. The data consumer, we have defined data consumer in iShare. There's data provider, which is also defined in iShare. This identity provider, which we already saw in our role model. The authorizations provider, that's also defined in the role model. And of course the marketplace, where you are able to find the data of other participants. And FIWARE brings the open source version of these roles. There are already implementations available from FIWARE. The key aspect or the key element of the data provider being like context broker, which can provide data in a standardized manner, as explained by Chuanjo, using NGS ILD. The identity provider, there is identity provider implementation, which has been complied with iShare specifications now, which is also available open source. The FIWARE market or i4Trust marketplace, which is available under this project, is of course open source version coming from FIWARE, also compliant with iShare specifications on machine to machine and human to machine interactions. And authorization registry provider, so there is an authorization registry open source version available from FIWARE, which is compliant with iShare specifications. And now we will see in detail each role, what each role of i4Trust means essentially. And yeah, so trust provider essentially facilitates the trust in the data space, and it acts as a guardian of that data space. Of course, within the data space, you need to be able to have a trusted party where every organization can register and sign that multilateral contract with. And every other party who wants to interact with another party should be able to reach out to this trust provider to verify the authenticity of that identity. It also plays the role of guardian, in the sense that when there are issues within the data space, it's a place where organizations can report the issues with. And the trust provider can in turn guide actions taken, so that it helps resolve the issues that a participant within the data space faces. But of course, this all works in a well governed manner, and it is not only one organization determining it, but it's more of a democratic process in that, as explained in the governance structure, right? So, but in i4Trust, we expect, or in general, we expect every data space to have at least one organization playing this role, but it is not restricted to only one organization. Depending on the data space, there could be more providers playing this role within the data space, right? So, uh, and now we talk about the data exchanging parties. So, because i4Trust enables data sharing among the parties in a trusted and secure manner, each of these organizations or each of these players can exchange data in a trusted manner. Data owner gets the sovereignty of the data and ease of authorizing consumers to have access to the data directly from its provider. Data provider makes sure that it identifies and authenticates the data consumer before sharing any kind of data which the data owner has authorized towards to, right? And data consumer can easily get the data directly from the source, which is much more up to date, right? And efficient. And it also knows how to handle this data, because now data owner has defined what exactly how they are going to handle the data, right? Identity provider role, in order for interactions where humans are involved, human identity establishment is quite key to the whole process, right? I mean, today, if you log into your Gmail account, you need to provide your credentials to make sure that Gmail can give access to the email inbox, right, to you. But in organizations, of course, it also happens in a similar manner. If uh, I'm an employee of this organization and I want to access data at another organization, I need to be able to prove that I'm this person, I'm also working for this organization, and only when they are able to validate it, they are able to provide that data to me. So identity provider plays that key role in establishing that identity for humans within the network. So, and in iShare or in i4Trust, we have defined the identity provider role to be based on EIDAS framework. So there are, of course, level of assurance that are provided for the identities when the identity provider onboards the person. It determines, or it based on the level of assurance required, it requires a certain level of proofs and certain validations, as in going a physical check or things like that, to make sure that identity assurance can be given. And of course, identity provider, the organization itself, what processes it follows and what level of ISO standards or CMM levels they are following, determines their level of assurance, to make sure that you can rely on such a provider, right? So as an data provider, you have an option to ask for certain level of assurance of identity provider and certain level of assurance of identity itself before making any transaction with that user, right? So only when user satisfies those criteria, then only you can take the next steps in that sense. And of course, Keyrock, as I mentioned earlier, one of the open source components from FIWARE, which is an identity provider service. We have, as a part of i4Trust, it has been evolved to make sure it is compliant with iShare specifications. Authorizations provider is the role where so iShare defines, okay, the role, as in this role determines how to give option to the data owner the possibility to define a policy or define authorization towards data consumers, right? So it can use in the back end different kinds of technologies, like policy based, like SAML, XML, whatever kind of technology they can use or it can even use the transactional data like from within the backend systems like ERP, like TRM or other kind of systems, to determine if the user has access rights towards certain data from the data provider, right? So what we have defined in these terms is the authorizations provider. There is an APIs that are defined so that every data provider can query on those API to check if a certain consumer has access to certain data. It is authorization provider role to determine based on various data sources it can think of, or as defined in the business process of the data owner, uh, which elements to use to determine the authorization of that data consumer at that time, and provides with an answer to the data provider whether this consumer has access to that data or not. Again, Keyrock, which is the open source FIWARE component, also implements an authorization registry, which is based on policies. So users are able to define policies and store their to provide authorizations to data consumers. And this is just and one of the ways that authorization registries can be created. So Keyrock provides that one option. And there is of course the marketplace. So when there are known companies interacting with each other, you don't probably need a marketplace. But when you are talking about data spaces where there are a lot of organizations working and joining on the basis of exchanging data of similar nature, but they are not on a regular business connects with each other, marketplace enables them to share what data can be made available from the data owner. And for data consumers, it can search what kind of data is available in the market which I can use for my own purposes. And marketplace acts as a hosting a place where the data owners can publish what data can they sell or can they make provision for. On the other hand, the data consumers can find different offerings, and also of course competitive proper offerings of the similar data from various providers, and it can choose which data to use or which data to buy and use based on the conditions, based on the pricing, and with various other factors. On top of it, of course, this marketplace can act as clearing house and the broker when required, because of course now two unknown parties are exchanging data, and everything now happens online digitally, because provider has already published what it can sell, and consumer can now just transact that via marketplace. But it also needs, there can be different business models like pay-per-use kind of models, where you also need that, okay, when consumer actually consumes that data, there has to be a clearinghouse where it's a third party which can do a billing towards that it, so there is no dispute whether the consumer actually received the data or provider did provide the data or not, and based on that the billing is clear, right? Of course, these are those the earlier roles we thought were of course very basic and necessary, so we included them in i4Trust. But beyond that, there are more roles that we have seen, which are enabler roles, which may be necessary in some of the data spaces, but maybe not in every data space. Some of the examples are given here. Like, of course, I was just talking about clearing houses, so it can be a separate organization and not necessarily a marketplace. When there are a lot of identity providers, it may be necessary to have a broker in between to ease the integrations with data provider and data consumers. In that sense, when they are using different data standards, there might be need of data language vocabulary provider or data model translation provider kind of services. So depending on the need of the data space, additional roles can be defined, and their purpose are defined based on that, and they can be added in the data space, right? Over to you, Juanjo.
Yes, thanks. So with this, we will be moving to the last part of the presentation. Let me share the screen again. Good. I hope you see my screen, which is a bit elaborating on certain aspects regarding i4Trust that go beyond the technology. Well, this was something I presented before, so simply again emphasize i4Trust is not just a program that is bringing a complete framework for supporting the creation of data spaces, even though, of course, this is one of the major goals of the program. It's about creating a community around it, and the way to the kind of actors we want to engage are on one side digital innovation hubs across Europe, but also SMEs. And digital innovation hubs are welcome to become part of the i4Trust community. We have created what we referred as the Digital Innovation Hubs Working Group, where any digital innovation hub in Europe willing to understand a bit more about i4Trust and disseminate that to SMEs in their network is invited to join. And SMEs individually can as well join the i4Trust community. The community is based on a platform that is supported by Funding Box, and you can get access to it through the website of i4Trust. And as a first attempt to incorporate members in this community and stimulate adoption, we will be funding a number of experiments through a number of open calls. Target goal is that once we conclude these two open calls, we will have more than 150 SMEs involved in different kind of experiments using i4Trust technology. This is the community platform that I was referring to before. You have to click on the spaces.fundingbox.com and well, you have here the link, and through this you will get access to the community where you will find different different spaces for exchange among members of the community. This is the working group for involving DIHs I was mentioning to you. There will be news where we will keep you posted on any particular new event or new milestone we achieve within the program. And very important, there will be a help desk that the different members of the community could use to formulate their questions on i4Trust, and then this will be taken by either an existing DIH or the core partners of i4Trust, who will try to answer you as fast as possible and in the most complete and comprehensive manner. A little bit, some few words regarding the DIH's working group. We are intending to engage digital innovation hubs in Europe that are part of the S3 catalog. This is, as many of you may know, the catalog of digital innovation hubs that the European Commission has set up within their European Digital Innovation Hub programs. And well, we invite any DIHs within that catalog to join our community and go through training and support provided by the different i4Trust partners. What would be the benefits for DIHs joining i4Trust is, well, they will really get at the forefront of the data space revolution, as we like to say. Many people is talking about data spaces today, but I think it's the right time to really bring into concrete details how this can be materialized. This is something you will be able to do with i4Trust, and therefore, as a DIH, you will be able to offer i4Trust technologies to the SMEs in your network, and then get everything ready for creating data spaces. You will be receiving training and coaching, and as such, DIHs that will be willing to join the i4Trust community will be able to attend any of our i4Trust training camps that we will run from time to time, and experts, that technical experts a given DIH may bring on the table, and who may attend this training camp will be able to not only become a FIWARE certified expert, but also become a FIWARE an iShare implementation partner, and they will be also entitled to get a certification as a FIWARE, as an i4Trust expert that then can bring the necessary support to SMEs willing to use the i4Trust framework. There will be open calls, as I mentioned. Indeed, we have completed just the first of these open calls. The open calls were aimed at engaging SMEs and slightly bigger companies who, together with DIHs, were able to create consortia aimed at creation of data spaces for solving particular challenges. The kind of experiments we are looking for will typically involve 4 entities per proposal, so should be at least 1 DIH and 3 SMEs or slightly bigger companies. And well, the kind of experiments we are looking for is any kind of experiment where actually the implementation of an effective data sharing policy among companies lead to creation of some new service or the improvement of existing processes. Okay, this is just for some of you to know what was the timeline of the first open call. Actually, this has been completed, as I mentioned earlier. The open call 1 was closed on 25th of October last year, and the first set of selected experiments are going to start just these days, and actually the kickoff is this week through this welcome event that involves this training. There will be an open call following the same sort of pattern, with info days and also a day at which the open call will be launched. That would be sometime along May, probably end of May. And the intention is that there will be second set of experiments that will be selected through this second open call. Within the first open call results, there were a number of experiments selected. Here I'm just listing the name of some of them. There were quite a number of them focused on agri-food and the value chain associated to agri-food production. There were some others focused on logistics, smart environment, energy, smart ports, so different topics, which in total brought to us quite a good variety of experiments and also a good number of experiments that may help to actually kick off the creation of data spaces in sectors like logistics, agri-food, and so on. Again, the second open call will be closing third quarter of 2022, will be probably launched in May. So those that wish to get engaged through this second open call, please stay tuned. We will be advertising and giving additional info through the website. Just last slide to finish this presentation, and we can spend a bit the last 15 minutes to answer any questions you may have. A bit of a summary of the good reasons why it would be important joining the i4Trust program. First of all, we are talking about how to make data spaces a reality today. And this is by means of this genuine combination of iShare and FIWARE building blocks that are already mature building blocks that have been used in multiple systems already in productions, now bring together for the first time to bring support to data spaces. We are talking about the combination of ecosystems associated to both iShare and FIWARE that already mean a significant set of actors involved. iShare, we are talking about already more than 5,000 participants sharing data. In FIWARE, more than 100 organization members already developing solutions based on the technology, FIWARE technology. So altogether, we have a good basis for creating the kind of ecosystem that data spaces that will help to boost development of data spaces. Very important, we think, it's that of the strategic alignment of the approach we are bringing into on the table with the existing European Commission CEF digital program, the Connecting Europe Facility program. So as part of the design is this idea of being compatible with the building blocks that the European Commission are recommending under this program. And well, this is an excellent opportunity for SMEs, but also for digital innovation hubs to become hubs associated to this framework. Therefore, as a side effect, be able to become FIWARE iHubs and also iShare partners, and bottom line, be recognized as a frontrunner organizations behind the development and the uptake of data spaces in Europe. So thank you everyone for listening to this presentation, and with this I suggest we just devote the last 15 minutes if there are any questions that anyone has formulated, then we could answer. Okay, there was one question already formulated about the FIWARE security system. Yes, there will be session that will be very much focused on the FIWARE security framework, and that complies with iShare specifications, and therefore will be can be used as basis for creating supporting identity and access management in i4Trust. This particular session is taking place. If you allow me just taking a look at the program. The identity and access management components will be explained in detail during the session we will be running tomorrow at 3:30. You know that from this afternoon till Friday, every day we will have a training session from 3:30 to 6:30. And the one of today will be very much focused on NGS-ILD basics, and we will also be covering smart data models. Jason Fox and Alberto Bella will be the trainers taking care of that session. And during the session tomorrow, we will be covering the components for identity and access management that where I think we will be able to answer all your questions, all the questions you have. Any other question which may have been formulated? Okay, about support to blockchain smart contracts. Okay, this is a topic that we had planned for be the second phase of i4Trust, but we may accelerate this for some of the experiments within i4Trust that were selected through the first open call that were willing to use blockchain technology. There are a number of components available in FIWARE that bring support to integration with blockchain technologies, blockchain networks, essentially being able to log concrete transactions you may perform using NGS-ILD into the blockchain and do this automatically for you. It's based on a component called Kenny's Major. So there will be, for those experiments, willing to integrate or incorporate blockchain elements in the experiments. You have got assigned a mentor that that is precisely an expert in blockchain and knows very well what these components from FIWARE that support and solve this automated integration of NGS-ILD with blockchain networks. And so you will have the opportunity to discuss with him how this technology could be used. For the rest of people not connected to experiments in i4Trust, just tell you in advance that as part of the evolution of the i4Trust framework, we are incorporating the support to the integration with blockchain networks, and this will be something that will become available along this year, probably first quarter of this year. Any other questions you may have? If not, let me share very quickly with you the agenda for the remaining of the week. I think it could be good for everyone to make sure we are on the same page. So right now, in 10 minutes, we will have a short break and we will have a plenary mentoring session that will be conducted by Rajiv. This is only specific to the i4Trust experiments that were selected in the first open call. In the afternoons, every day from 3:30 to 6:30, there will be a training, a number of training sessions carried out by different experts where you will learn all you need to know about FIWARE technologies and FIWARE iShare compliant technologies to be used for creating data space based on i4Trust. And on Friday from 12 to 1, we will be running a training session that is particularly relevant for DIHs involved in experiments or willing to be part of the DIH working group, where we will explain to you how we plan to handle multi-time support to the different SMEs willing to use i4Trust framework. There will be, for the experiments that were selected through the first open call, a number of individual mentoring sessions that will be running from Tuesday to Friday. And I guess you have been interacting already about and agreeing on what concrete time slot to use for the individual mentoring session. So everything should be all set for you.
You still have time to answer one more question.
Yeah. Okay. What is how far FIWARE and digital twin technology covered in this training? Yeah, well, I mean, when we talk about digital twin and how we model systems based on digital twins using FIWARE context broker technology, this is going to be quite extensively covered in this training. So there are today we will start with the basics, but there will be a session that is going to cover advanced NGS-ILD programming. So therefore, I think you will have you will get all the hints to be able to design your systems based on digital twins using FIWARE technology along this training bootcamp. Okay, if not more questions, let's stop here and have a quick and short break, 5 minutes. Those experiments that were selected through the i4Trust open call will then be able to join the plenary mentoring session that will start at 12. So we will wait for you by then. Thank you very much and talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.